Jeannie Lauren Dowden for Conduit News, and today we have Professor Robert Steinbuch joining us. He is a professor at the UALR Bowen School of Law. Of course, anytime the professor is joining us, these are his thoughts and opinions, not those represented by the law school. Hi, Professor.
Hi, Jenny. It's great to be back with Conduit as usual.
You too. Well, we're glad to have you. I recently read that you were found to be proven right in an issue happening there at the law school regarding you observing the Jewish holidays. Can you just catch our viewers up on that?
Sure. I'm not sure there's really that much new news. That is, as you know, we talked on your show a week or plus ago, and pursuant to a Freedom of Information Act request, I got a copy of the report, largely, small section was redacted, a copy of the report from the panel of university professors chosen to decide this issue, confirming indeed that I am entitled in the future to use guest lecturers, as I have been using in the past for nearly 20 years when I take leave during a Jewish holiday. There are, by the way, that's not a lot of time. At most, it's 3 days a year. I say at most, of course, because class schedules change, so I don't know what day a class necessarily falls on. And as you may know, the Jewish holidays, the dates of them actually change as well, because Jewish holidays are based on the Jewish calendar, which is an old lunar calendar. It's less efficient than the solar calendar. And so one year, Hanukkah, for example, which many people know because it recently passed and it's near Christmas, can fall right on Christmas Day. And in another year, it could be a month before. So it varies. And so it could fall on a weekend, whatever the case may be. So at most, 3 days a year. And that report that I got with the FOIA request made clear that I have that right. And indeed, the three members of that panel, one was chosen by me, and it's not a buddy of mine, it's just someone who I respect. In fact, he is a chair of a very important committee. And then one was chosen by the dean and one was chosen by the chancellor. So 2/3 of that committee were chosen by the administration, and it was unanimous in favor on this issue that we're discussing. So right now, I'm waiting to hear from the chancellor in the sense that my belief, my understanding is that that report, it becomes the rule. That they issued their decision and that's the decision. But yet the report was sent to the chancellor. So it's not 100% clear to me whether the chancellor has a role in approving that or potentially saying no. And as I mentioned to you, I think last time we spoke, irrespective of what the formal role is, of course, I would welcome, and in fact, I request and encourage that the chancellor comes out and says, that's right, because I think that's an important message to send. Remember, the chancellor did an excellent job when the whole secret renaming of an endowed professorship at the Bowen Law School occurred. And a colleague of mine raised the issue, not me. I wish I did. I wish I could take full credit for it, but I wasn't as smart as he was. And he said, wait, what? When did this happen? And he sent out a detailed email saying, no one's talked to us about this. How did this happen? And the dean wrote back and said, well, it's not up to you all. Okay. And then I said, he may have said too, but certainly I said, I don't recall frankly what he said. I said, no, that position was never named after Clinton. 20 years ago when the position was created, there was a desire initially to name it after Clinton. They asked him, he said yes for a moment, and then the whole impeachment, the disbarment process, post-impeachment disbarment process was underway, and he withdrew that approval. And the school knew it. The documentation is clear on that. And it says in the documentation that he withdrew that approval. And in fact, the school then reached out to somebody else to say, hey, can we name it after you instead of Bill Clinton? Because Bill Clinton has understandably withdrawn his name from approval. And all that was in the school's files for the long, since inception.
Yeah.
And I made that point generally saying, look, I understood from the get-go that there was a desire to name this after Clinton, but that desire was never fulfilled because a decision was made not to name it after Bill Clinton. And sure enough, I was right on the money, and that decision was made by Bill Clinton himself. And so I wasn't, frankly, treated very nicely in that exchange, being told that none of my colleagues care about this issue. By the way, A, they did, and B, oh, is that the standard, Ginny, by which we measure truth?
Right.
Whether someone else is interested in it? Oh, you're not interested in it? Everybody's turning a blind eye. Remember that, you know, of course, the three, what is it? The three monkeys: hear no evil, see no evil,
Yes.
speak no evil, right? So,
Right.
okay, they've got their hands over their ears, so we can do whatever we want.
I think that's
So-
the way culture would certainly like things to go.
I know it. I know it. And so I really found that an odd comment. And then, of course, you might recall as well that the dean said to me, well, you applied to teach adjunct at the Clinton School. Frankly, I don't even remember, but I don't
Right, I
deny
remember
that. I'd be happy to bring some conservative perspective to a bastion of leftism. Really, I would. And so let's assume I made that offer. By the way, if I did it, I make it right now on Conduit's show for any leftist that's watching. What are the odds? Low, I fear. And we'll see if they take me up on it. And she said,
Right.
well, why would you offer to teach at the Clinton School if you think that an endowed professorship that wasn't named after Clinton, because he said it shouldn't be named after him after he was undergoing a disbarment process, that's a conflict, she suggests. And as I think I mentioned to you before, by the way, I also go through the Clinton airport and I don't burst into flames when I enter through those doors, right? So it's this kind of, I don't know what to call that. I can't even call that an argument. That's not an
Yeah,
argument.
it's a bit
That's a
irrational.
stick in the eye.
Right.
So that's where we were on that. Fast forward. Oh, so the chancellor, shortly before Jason Rapert, the chair of the Senate
Right.
Oversight Committee, held a joint House and Senate oversight hearing. The chancellor wrote a very good, solid letter saying what I just described to you, not all this stuff about the pettiness that was imposed upon me, but said we have reviewed the documentation, which the school had the whole time, and it's clear that Clinton has not approved the use of his name, so we certainly are not going to use his name. Really? That's what I said months and months ago.
What lessons have you learned through going through these two different scenarios?
That's an excellent question. One of the lessons I learned is a lesson that my father taught me, so it just reinforced it. And that is, you have no rights, Jimmy, unless you enforce them. Rights don't mean something on paper. They mean something to people. Too many academics, in fact, talk about these broad, well, we need to fight, we need to be anti-racist is one of these comments you hear a lot. What are you doing? What are you doing about it? If you're an anti-racist, have you stepped up and commented on my case positively, for example? There are plenty of folks in this community, academic and otherwise, who claim to be anti-racist. Have you inquired of me? Have you read the Masterson articles on both of these issues, the Clinton issue and the observance of religion? And have you come out and made a public statement in agreement with me and with the panel, with the Anti-Defamation League? And I can even go on. Have you done that? Or do you just like to pontificate in a vacuum? So this is a real world. And my dad grew up under some really hard times. And he said, you have no rights unless you enforce it. And that's what I've done here. I've enforced my rights for myself and for those that come after me as well.
Well, let's switch gears for a second. You have talked about this before on Conduit, the importance of getting involved in local elections. We're gearing up for a lot of races. We're seeing how they're shaping up. Just last night here in Northwest Arkansas, there was a runoff between Republican candidates, Colby Fulfer and Steve Unger. When you look at the numbers, when it was the total that came in, it was very narrow, less than 100 votes between those two Republican candidates. Give us your impression on that and the importance of elections moving forward.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. Each of the candidates got about 1,000 votes, and the one who won, I don't know either one of them, and I hope to get to know, well, actually both, but certainly the one in office, because I hope to work with him as I've been working with many of the legislators. But I don't know either one of them. But the one who won by, I believe, less than 100 votes.
Right.
Out of a total of less than 2,000, roughly 2,000 votes.
That's right.
And it just points out that every vote matters. In these state elections, every vote matters. People say, well, I'm not going to vote in the presidential election because, my vote doesn't matter. We've seen on occasions where it does, but I get that notion. But when it comes to these state elections, oh my gosh, every vote really does matter. And there's only 35 senators in the whole state legislature. It's an incredibly important position. And of course, the legislature as a body, meaning the House and the Senate combined, is the most democratic, small d, of course, body or branch of government that we have. So I'm a fan of all. I like judges. I'm a lawyer. I like the executive. I think they do some good things. Their purpose is to do some good things. But if I had to pick one branch that's my favorite, it's the legislative branch. Now, I also worked in the legislative branch, not as an elected official, to be clear. I was, as you might recall, a counsel in the United States Senate Judiciary Committee. And that was a fantastic job. And seeing the inside workings is amazing.
Yeah.
But it just shows everybody needs to be involved. In one way, they should be involved, indeed, is to watch programming and read articles like those that come from Conduit. And I mean that. I don't mean that just because I'm on your show. I wouldn't be on your show if I didn't mean that.
Well, thank you.
Right? You guys put out a lot of quality product. Of course, you have your, what's it called? Not a checklist. It's the when you rank scorecard. Thank you.
Yeah.
The Conduit scorecard. That is an admirable scorecard. And other groups put out scorecards. The reader has to decide what interests them, right? If you're a lefty, well, the Conduit, then you should turn the Conduit card upside down and read it that way, right? Because the Conduit card ranks people concerning conservative values. Mm-hmm. So if you're a lefty, just turn it upside down, and then you can make your decisions that way. So you have to choose. But I subscribe to most of the views of Conduit. And so therefore, I find it an extremely valuable resource. I look forward to when you start scoring candidates for the upcoming election as well. And as you know, I have endorsed and I'm a big supporter of my law partner, Chris Corbett, who's running for the House seat in District 55, a true conservative who understands how the system works. And unlike his opponent, doesn't take $500 in per diem to show up to a local meeting to line his pocket. So I am going around this state making sure that every candidate that I believe is conservative knows that he or she can reach out to me for any assistance, because it is critical that we continue to move this state in a conservative direction through electing conservative representatives.
I agree. And on top of the scorecard, you mentioned finances and candidates, that sort of thing. Our latest Follow the Money report will soon be released, and that will include, legislators, candidates, and will be a great tool moving into the election. And you can really see who's financing and funding these candidates. So that will be telling as well.
I think that's such an important point, Ginny, if I may focus on it, because where the money comes from, critical, and how people deal with finances. That was the point that I raised in the Chris Corbett election, where, as I mentioned, his opponent was on the city council, I think it's called, and they get a per diem. Now, remember what per diem is. Per diem is when you're supposed to get, your gas money and the Burger King costs. You're not supposed to be able to go out to some fancy restaurant at the Ritz and fly the Concorde, particularly when you're going to a meeting in town, right? City Hall is in town. And yet these folks awarded themselves a per diem of $500 a day before this guy even got on the body. But then he cashed those checks. And here's one thing you never have to do. You never need to sign the back of a check for money that you don't deserve. You don't need to take money from the public. You're taking that out of the pockets of the public to show up to a government meeting for food and for travel at $500 for an evening. It's not right.
Yeah. Well, let's also talk about the responsibility that legislators have being a good steward of Arkansans' money. We're coming up on the fiscal session soon. Governor Hutchinson released his proposal. It's over $194 million. They're in the middle of hearings right now. And I think I read that there could potentially be a 3% increase. Talk to us about the responsibility of these legislators. Is it just to look at the budget and say, green light, that looks solid to us? Or is it more about digging into the details, looking at that fine print, and then figuring out a way, okay, we're going to give you these funds, but here's how it should be allocated. What is the role of our legislature in all of this?
Indeed, it's such an important and often overlooked issue. First of all, we as Arkansans and we as Americans are overtaxed. That's the bottom line. We pay too much money to our government. Well, Rob, we need to do this and this on the roads and this on the bridges and this on the buildings and this on the water. There's always a need, I put in quotes. Right? Because one person's want is another person's need. There's always a need. But the fact is that government keeps taking more and more from us. Now, to give credit where credit's due, I think we just passed a tax cut that was proposed by the governor. Good start. We just had a tax cut on used cars up to a certain dollar amount. Not enough. Not enough. It should be. You shouldn't be. The government already collected money on that sale. They need to collect money again? Really? Really?
Right.
And indeed, from people who are buying cars less than $10,000, those are not rich folks. But you're sticking your hand in their pocket yet again. So one thing is, when we get into the fiscal session, I believe that we need to continue to cut taxes, to rein in expenses. So when a state agency comes to a legislator and the legislature and says, we need this much money, maybe they don't.
Right.
I'll tell you this, overall, they don't. There should be cutting going on.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is, I believe that legislators can do a better job of dictating, that's their job, how our money is spent.
Right.
Not government money, it's the people's money.
Right.
And so, for example, one of the issues, as we know, that came up in the general session is whether education, lower and higher education, K through 12 and higher education, is employing critical race theory. And I believe Trent Garner authored what's now an act on that issue. So this is an important issue to the legislature. Well, guess what? When you start allocating funds for those same institutions to be spending K through 12 and higher education, you can restrict those funds the same way you can use substantive legislation to restrict activities, and they should.
But it seems as though they don't, my personal opinion, it seems as though, man, to then say to these K through 12 schools, universities, public school system, that almost just seems like a step too far for some of them.
Well, part of the problem, as you likely know, is that at least in higher ed, you hear this claim, well, Amendment 80, I think it's 80, but doesn't matter. There's this constitutional provision that gives a certain level of autonomy to higher ed. Not that much.
Yeah.
Guess what? Not that much. To paraphrase an old line, if they think they have all that autonomy, let them go raise their own money. So the fact is that higher ed and K through 12 are regulated by the legislature because the legislature is responsible to the people. That's
Right.
how it works. There's no independent branch of government known as higher ed. This is comparable to the argument made by Game and Fish. As you know, Chris Corbett and I told you my law partner and I are litigating a case in which Game and Fish, get this, you're going to love it. I know you know already. Game and Fish says you can't carry a gun into the office building at the gun range. No, just leave it outside. Leave it on the stoop. That's safer. Then you're fine.
Right.
So their rule is designed for faux safety. It's fake safety to begin with, but not fake safety for the public. Fake safety for the government employees that you're paying for.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Guns are good as long as that they're not near us. Wait, what? You work at a gun range, and that's the office of the gun range. So then the next claim, by the way, is, hey, it ain't an office. It's a house.
Right.
Who live in there? So they made also this kind of absurd argument that they're a standalone branch of government based on a constitutional provision. Both of those arguments are rubbish.
It's so interesting and humorous at times to me how the goalposts just keep moving all over the place. And you sometimes think, like, am I crazy? Like, what is happening here? Like, with the issue of not being able to have a gun in the gun range, that doesn't make sense. Like, you know that I know that, but they just want to keep marching forward with it.
Yeah, Ginny, take it even further. People with an enhanced license, and that's the license you would need to carry the gun into the office, can carry a gun onto the floor of the state capitol with that license. And they have done so now for years, and not one problem has occurred. Of course, in a similar lawsuit against the city of Little Rock, rather, they said, oh, you can't carry a gun in here, even though the law allows, separate law allows that as well. And their claim is our employees are afraid. Well, guess what? The people that got to walk through your dangerous city not being protected because there are insufficient police resources allocated by this mayor are afraid to walk in to that building without a gun. How about their fears?
Yeah. Well, it's always so much fun to have you on the Conduit Show. As you're talking, I could come up with probably many more questions, but that will we'll be here all day. So we'll have to have you back on really soon so we can continue this conversation. Is there anything else that you want to add?
Just that I look forward to being on next time with you, Ginny.
All right. Well, thank you, Professor. We'll talk soon.
Thanks so much.